Assalamu alaikum dear students. Now we will resume our general anatomy lectures. We have completed with the general structure of the bone, types of the bone, their formation and cartilages. Now we will start with the joints, that is another component of the skeletal system. By the end of this lecture you will be able to define joints, you will be able to enumerate their functions, you will be knowing their types, and you will be able to classify different types of joints. What is joint? Joint is a connection between between two bones. This connection is stabilized by different types of connective tissue, ligaments and tendons. Generally, the joints are classified into main three types. First is Synostosis, that denotes immovable joints. Syn means totally united. Secondly, we have the Arthrosis, that are partially movable joints. Partially, amphi means partial to some degree. And finally, we have Diarthrosis. Diarthrosis are completely movable joints that allow movement in all directions. These are the synovial joints basically. The joints are classified as our first main classification was the Synostosis, that is further subclassified into different types. We have fibrous joints, they are further classified as sutures, Syndesmosis and Gullfoss. Now we will do details of the sutures. Sutures are of different types. We have almost 5 types of sutures. Firstly, we have the serrate sutures. As the name denotes, the opposing edges of the bones are like saw. You might have seen saw that is used for cutting purposes. Major examples are the sagittal suture and coronal sutures of the skull. You can appreciate here, this is the on the skull in normal retrace, you can appreciate the black box there, that is showing the coronal suture. The opposing edges of the bones are like sawtooth, that is highlighted below as well. Next we have the denticulate sutures. The opposing edges of the bones are like tooth processes that interdigitate with one another. The main example is the lambdoid suture. You can appreciate here the denticulate sutures are shown just below the serrate sutures, just below the, and they are tooth-like processes that are going to fit with one another. On the left side, the lower figure. The third type of immovable joint in sutures is the Schema sutures. The margins are overlapping of the joint forming bones. The major example is the temporoparietal suture. Here you can appreciate in this figure. This is the example. The highlighted below the lower box black denotes the Schema suture, in which the two bones, opposing edges of the bones are overlapping. Then we come to the plain sutures. Plain sutures, as the name shows, the opposing surfaces are flat that form the joint. The major example is the intermaxillary suture. Here you can see in the norma basilis, uh, there is a box, black box, that shows the intermaxillary suture. That is highlighted below. The opposing edges of the bones are flat. In the last, we have Syndesmosis, that is the fifth type of sutures in which a ridge fits in a groove. Major example is the suture between the vomer and the sphenoid bone. Here you can appreciate the vomer bone. Look at the ella of the vomer that are forming a V-shaped configuration, and the vomer and the rostrum of the sphenoid bone that fits into this V-shaped area that forms the syndesmosis. Where this joint is located? Here, on the posterior surface of the palate and between the basi-occiput. You can appreciate here the vomer and the sphenoid bone. The major second type of the joint is the syndesmosis. In syndesmosis, the bony surfaces are held together by interosseous ligaments. There is a ligament that is present between the two bones. This is a list of examples of the syndesmosis in which inferior tibiofibular joint, ligamentum flava, that is basically present between the vertebrae, then intertransverse ligaments, then interspinous ligaments. These all are the ligaments of the vertebrae between the radius and ulna and between the tibia and fibula. Then we come to the Gullfoss, immovable joint, third type we are doing. In Gullfoss, an elongated peg fits into a elongated hole or a socket that is held together by ligaments. Here you can appreciate the presence of the bony socket there, presence of the tooth in the bony socket that is stabilized by these thread-like ligaments. Highlighted view you can appreciate on the upper side. Now we come to the partially movable joints that are known as the amphiarthrosis. Amphiarthroses are further classified into Syncrondrosis and symphysis, or you can say primary or secondary joints. Firstly, we come to the Syncrondrosis. In Syncrondrosis, as the name denotes, there is cartilage present between the two bones that are forming the joint. The cartilage is of hyaline type. And here you can appreciate the figure. You can appreciate the two opposing bones. In the center, there is a cartilage that is stabilizing the bone. Basically, this cartilage is of hyaline type and it is involved in the growth of the bones and allow no movement. Basically, this is meant for the growth or lengthening of the bone. After puberty ceases, this cartilage is replaced by bone. We have a lot of examples of these types of joints. Epiphyseal cartilages of the long bones, ethmoid and sphenoid bone, they are also joints by this Syncrondrosis joint. Then we have the sphenoid and occipital bones, occipital and the petrous. These are the joints of the skull. Occipital and the petrous temporal bone, first rib and the sternum. You might have studied the upper limb. Here you can appreciate the figure A that has been highlighted. This is the example of the Syncrondrosis. Next, we come to the second type of amphiarthrosis, that is also called the secondary cartilaginous joint and allow limited amount of movement. Basic art. Here you can appreciate the figure of the symphysis. In symphysis, there is a disc of fibrocartilage present between the two hyaline cartilages that are covering the opposing edges of the bones that are going to form the joint. Here you can see the disc of the fibrocartilage present in the center. Then you can appreciate the blue color, that is the articular cartilage, that is hyaline cartilage basically. On upper and lower sides of the articular cartilage there is bone. This is called secondary joint because this persists throughout the life. Here the cartilage persists throughout life. Sometimes it may be partially or completely ossified, and this bony union is known as the Synostosis. Major examples of this type of joint are the sacrum and the coccygeal segments, and we have the pubic symphysis, manubrium and the body of the sternum, between bodies of the vertebrae. Here you can appreciate the pubic symphysis and the bodies of the vertebrae. This joint is present basically here. Now we come to the summary of the joints. We have major three types of joints. One are the fibrous joints, in which we did the sutures, we did the syndesmosis. Then we did the cartilaginous joints, in which we did the synchondrosis and symphysis. Synovial joints are still remaining. We will cover them in the next lecture, inshallah. Thank you for your attention.